So we've known each other for a while now, and I remember having a conversation with you when you first got started, and I mean literally first got started. I don't mean in real estate or this final business chapter. I mean just getting started, going to school, and talking about really not having a path yet, and not knowing what to do. And I was really surprised by that because of how much you've accomplished. And I know that that will help a tremendous amount of people that are sitting there trying to figure out who they are. And we don't have to know all the pieces today, right? So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's easy for me to look back at this point in my life and see, like in high school, I had no direction. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. I found a school paper that said, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to be either the U.S. president or play baseball." That's how much direction I had. And I was a very mediocre student, very mediocre. I didn't stand out in my class. I never ran for any offices or that sort of thing, and wasn't the big, sports star. I played sports, but I just kind of blended in with the masses, quite honestly. And that's why, in my era, in the mid-'60s, when Vietnam was, at its peak, I had to make a decision at 17, because I was young for my class. And I graduated before I turned 18 when they had to register for the draft. And I said, am I going to go to college? Right? I had a couple of scholarship offers, but I couldn't accept them because my grades were too poor, and which was an eye-opener. And so I had to decide, what are you going to do? And I just had very little direction. So I joined the military when I was 17 because I knew going to college would really be a waste of my time and the people that were teaching a waste of their time.
So you obviously learned that.
Yeah.
You knew a standard for yourself.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even put myself in a category that I was desperate for direction. I really wasn't. I was just kind of going through the motions, and then in the military, I didn't stand out. I wasn't, the leader of the pack, and that's really, I did my time and did what I was trained to do, and I never went to college, and when I got out of the military, I went into, didn't know what to do also, and I was watching TV one night and I saw this police show and I said, oh, that'd be pretty cool. So, that's how much thought I gave to that, and all of a sudden, 3 months after I turned 21, I went to work for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office. So I was a cop in LA for a couple of years, and I was married when I was 18, had a little girl, and then that marriage, dissolved. Probably a big part of it was my fault, more than likely, and I just want to start over. So I left LA and moved to Reno, Nevada, and went to work for Reno PD, and I was a cop there for 5 years, and I went to college like at night, off and on a little bit, but never accumulated many credits because I still really didn't know what I wanted to do. I enjoyed being a policeman. I really enjoyed it. But like a lot of young men and women in law enforcement, kind of got burned out,
What did you enjoy about it?
I'll answer it this way. When I did go to college at night, take classes, my major was sociology. I wanted to change the world. I wanted to help people, and it was kind of an eye-opener that a lot of people didn't really want to be helped. And it was kind of deflating, my vision of making the world a better place. And, so it sounds really corny, but the truth is I really wanted to help people. I really did. And in law enforcement, there were many opportunities to do that, and there are other opportunities that kind of leave a sour taste in your mouth too. A lot of people don't want any help, and they don't want you involved in their life. And so, and I advanced fairly quickly through law enforcement, but still, education-wise, I didn't read books. I wasn't a reader until later after that, So yeah, I'm not the prototypical, boy, he was born to be a superstar and set records, and not the case at all.
But there were things that happened and it triggered something else. And then you saw that there were possibilities. And probably one of those is really changing people's lives, because I see that you're doing that even now. You had a huge experience in serving for the police that actually became a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and there again, when I moved to Reno, Nevada from LA, having been a policeman there for 2 years, the Reno Police Department got all excited. They said, "Oh, look what we got here. We got somebody. He's 23 years old. He's brand new to Reno. Nobody knows him. He's got prior law enforcement experience, and he's single. He can work 7 days a week, not bother anybody." And so they said, "We want you to work undercover narcotics division," and right out of the police academy. I said, "Oh, okay." And and so I started doing that for about 6 months. Buying some drugs here and there, and just little things, and letting my hair grow and my beard grow, and then one night I bought some heroin from a pretty bad guy, and the district attorney's office made a deal with him. And they said, "We won't prosecute you on these charges if you agree to take Rick with you and introduce him to all your little friends." And he happened to be a member of an outlaw motorcycle gang. So to this day, I have no idea how, but the city of Reno went out and leased a chopper, a Harley, and that night a Reno motorcycle cop taught me how to ride a motorcycle. I'd never ridden a motorcycle, so I'm riding this motorcycle, and I spent 13 months living, traveling, committing crimes with him, and so I did that for over a year. Yeah.
That had to be overwhelming.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I lost 35 pounds. I didn't sleep for a year. I was scared to death. I lived with him, lived in the same house with him, 17 of us, and I was scared to death for a year. Didn't eat, didn't sleep.
What was the goal other than staying alive?
I guess I took my assignment seriously, and then I recognized that in that subculture, there's the head of the snake, and you got to work your way up to get to the head of that snake. And if that meant that I had to do some things that I didn't really personally like, then that's what I did. So it was really, in the military, I became focused on accomplishing certain things that I was trained to do. And then law enforcement, during that assignment, I said, if that's my objective, to get to the top, then what do I need to do to get there? And I did those things. Yeah. So, and as a result, turned out pretty well for them. We indicted 104 people in 5 different states. And,
Which is amazing.
Yeah, over 100 of them went to prison. So,
one heck of a feat, and probably saved an awful lot of lives doing that.
I think so, yeah. And so it was a good experience in that. I mean, I hated it. During that assignment, my sister died, my younger sister, in the middle of that assignment, and so I had to go back to Los Angeles to be with my parents. And that was the first sign that I probably needed to get out of that assignment, because when I was there for those 5 days, I felt more comfortable with the bad guys than I did my own mother and father. And I was afraid to talk much because my language had taken a different direction. With foul language, it was just part of the
Right.
subculture, and so as a result, I didn't speak very much. I was afraid of how I might talk, and my mother was traumatized when she saw me, because you can take the biker and put him in the shower, but he's still a biker, and so they were quite alarmed, when they saw me, and it's really sad. And I think back on it, I wanted to get out of there and go back to where I was, because I felt more comfortable with those guys than I did my own family.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Well, that's how you had to live the role, though, in order to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You accomplished great things. Obviously, 105 people being arrested, 5 different states. It probably prevented a tremendous amount of stuff. What did it do to you?
Well, the city of Reno felt so responsible for my condition at that point, because the assignment ended not by our choice. They found out who I was and tried to kill me, and so I was traumatized by that, and
Pesky little detail.
That the city sent me to Mazatlan, Mexico for almost 2 months, and had 2 different psychologists came down and worked with me to learn how to say thank you again, and just kind of get to the surface things I'd pushed down, because I was at a point in my life where I think to some degree the success we have with that assignment is because I had such strong feelings towards those guys. I hated them. And I hated what they represented. And I saw what they did to people, or in front of people. Their thrust in life was just to be disgusting. The more disgusting they were, the better they felt, And so I really took on a very strong dislike for them. And so I had to shed those things. I had to get rid of those things. It took quite a bit of effort by a team of psychologists and a few years of the city of Reno, paying for my therapy to give me more centerline self, to be a little more understanding, not quite so rigid. Yeah.
Well, imagine how broken they were to become that bad. Honestly, to think about that, and not that you can have empathy because you have to go there, but you saw how much you changed in that short period of time infiltrating in. Imagine if somebody came up to people that were lost and didn't have a direction, and you can see how quickly things can go and take a turn for the worse.
Yeah, and it was really maybe the first time, I guess I was 23, 24 years old. It's probably the first time in my life that I actually saw that I had some leadership capabilities. Because even within that very negative world of that subculture, I kind of began to rise as a leader of that. And part of it was because my feelings were so strong, against them, but I knew what it took to get up to a position that I had some authority, so they would have to listen to me. And it was kind of an eye-opener for me to see that I had maybe that kind of discipline, to do those things.
You gotta get passionate enough about something, right?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so I did. So they made a movie, horrible movie. Yeah, it's called Beyond the Law, and people say, "Oh, who played you?" Well, Charlie Sheen played me. So it wasn't much of a stretch for old Charlie. Kind of came natural to him, I think. So yeah, people ask me all the time, "What's the name of that movie?" So, don't bother renting it.
Everybody's attached to that fame, but
right.
at what cost? Thank you very much for your service, because that did have a huge impact. Whether you enjoyed the moment or not, you really did make a huge difference.
Thank you.
So how do you transition from being in the police department and doing the things that you were doing and end up in real estate?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you do that? I think it's important that assignment, because we had so much success with it, accelerated me in law enforcement. So I ended up hiring all the new policemen and running the police academy, and became a detective at 27 years old, and so I advanced very quickly. But what I also ran into in the civil service world is that your success is somewhat limited simply by your longevity. The longer there, the more points you get, and the more you can advance. And I didn't understand why people that were, in my perception, were less qualified to be a leader than I was, who were over me. And I saw that in the military, I saw in law enforcement, and so that was a huge factor. And I said, you know what, I think I need to find something that I'm the one in control of my success. I mean, whatever I achieved, it wasn't, I had to take a test and be evaluated by somebody else. It was solely on me. And and the other factor in all candor was I didn't enjoy certain aspects of law enforcement. When I was a detective in a homicide case with a young girl, it was my first homicide, became attached to the family, which is a mistake to get emotionally involved, but I did. And I saw that, and it's not like TV, couldn't solve it in 48 hours, couldn't solve it.
Yeah.
And so that really frustrated me, and I knew myself well enough at that point that another case would come along, I would make the same mistake of getting involved, emotionally with the family. And so I simply decided that I needed to get out of that line of work, because I wasn't cut out for it, because I couldn't help become emotionally involved in it.
Which is not healthy for you.
It's not
for sure.
healthy, not healthy at all. No.
And sometimes you actually even need to have that distance to have perspective. There's no doubt about it. I love what you said about people moving up that don't deserve it just because they put in their time. And that old statement, the Peter principle, raising to their level of incompetence, right? And then all of a sudden somebody's in charge of you that doesn't have the ability and hasn't even changed with the times, right? And we see that in a lot of different industries too, not just in the police force or in military, and hopefully there are some that aren't like that. But so what put you into real estate? I mean, obviously I understand the control part, that you control your own results. But.
Yeah, I've asked myself that question many, many times, because it wasn't like I had this dream to go into real estate. I was frustrated in law enforcement. I knew I needed to do something else, and my dad had given me some money. He gave me $4,000 in 1975, and he said, go buy real estate. And so my best friend, Dwayne, he put in $4,000, I did, and we bought a duplex, you know, in Reno. And I said, well, that's kind of fun, though, because I didn't own a house, you know, I was living in an apartment. And we own this duplex, and I said, that's kind of cool. And so like a lot of people, as you know, I went to real estate school to learn how to, you know, about real estate, not realizing you learn how to take a test. That's what the pre-licensing is. And so that was my introduction, you know, as I got into the classes. I quit the real estate school 3 times. I quit. It was like 12 weeks, and I said, what am I doing this for? And they're not teaching me how to buy duplexes, you know? And so I did, I quit. But Phyllis, who owned the real estate school, took a liking to me, and I would run into her in town in Reno. She'd say, get back in there, get back. And so it did. It took me 3 times to finally get in there and complete the course. And then I passed the state exam by 2 questions. I barely passed. So there again, you know, not this rock star, you know. And then I was part-time because I love law enforcement still. And so for 1 year I was going to do both, which is, you know, totally what a joke that was. I mean, I'm working 62 hours a week as a detective. In my spare time, I'm going to sell houses, right? So I'm the typical part-timer. I think I made $1,100 my first year in real estate. But I saw enough of it that I saw, wow, here's something that I'm the only limit on what happens to my success. No one else. I'm the one that controls that. And that's what appealed to me.
That's funny, that's exactly what appealed to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to determine my net worth, I'm going to determine what I get for results, and it's about being in control, right, of your future and your life. So you went into it full time and you worked in an office that you ended up buying.
Yeah, but I think for a lot of people who are new, maybe it's just an important message for them, what I'm going to share. Here I am, I go to work, you know, it's this real estate company. And keep in mind, it's 1976, all right, a lot of years ago. And we had no training. They said, go get listings and go find buyers. And,
here's the phone book, start with the B's.
Yeah, you know, and so I remember sitting in one of my very first sales meetings, and they were talking about, and the market was really hot in 1976 to 78. Shortage of inventory, reminiscent of what we're going through right now as we film this, 2020. And I remember Chuck, this grizzly old sales guy, had said, I got a buyer for Smith Ridge Greens. Anybody get a listing of Smith Ridge Greens? I got the buyer right here. And I'm sitting there, and like a lot of people in real estate, I honestly didn't know what to do 8 hours a day. I mean, I was willing to work however many hours it took, but I really didn't know what to do. Because there was not like you open a book and say, okay, at 9 o'clock you do this, at 10, there was no book like that. And so I found a lot of frustration that after the sales meeting, I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and so I got my car, drove over to Smith Ridge Greens, and I started knocking on doors, and some lady answered. I said, do you think you want to sell the place? I said, some guy in my office says he's got a buyer. She goes, well, yeah, actually I do want to sell it. I went, you did? You do? You know, a true story. And she says, yeah, let's get this thing on the market. I had to go back to the office and get a listing contract because I didn't even have one. I said, I'll be right back. And I mean, that's how incompetent I really began my career. And so I came back and I filled out the contract as best I could. She said, what's this mean? I'm going, God, I don't have a clue what that means. I said, I'll find out when we get back to the office. I mean, that's the truth. So I go back to the office and I walk in with this listing, and Chuck happened to be there. And I said, hey, Chuck, I got a listing of Smith Ridge Greens. This is like my first couple weeks in full-time real estate. And his reaction, rather than what I anticipated, oh, great, let me show my buyer. He said, how'd you get that? It was like accusatory, you know, like, and I thought I was going to lose my license right away because I had obviously done something that violated some kind of law somewhere. And I said, well, I just went over there and you don't do it that way. And I mean, I really was nervous. Oh my God, what have I done? You know, so I think a lot of people new in real estate, they got to be careful on what other people say, you know, and
who you allow to influence you.
Yeah. So that was an eye-opening experience. But I saw the potential. Wow, I could do this because, you know, when I'm sitting in the office and look at these other people, almost all of them had some college. I didn't. almost all of them were older than me, because I was 28, and almost all of them had some other business experience before real estate. I was lacking in all three of those categories. And so for someone who'd been through what I'd been through, who you might assume has a great deal of self-confidence, I didn't. I had a lot of confidence in me in some ways, but on the business side, I had virtually no confidence.
Well, your experience wasn't there.
Yeah. So I had to overcome that. And I see a lot of people now, in my 40 plus years, I see a lot of people in similar situations where they come in and they don't really have enough, they think, to have much confidence. You know, I've said for years, this business is not really complex, even though it's become more complex with, you know, contracts and technology. What we do for a living is not really all that complex, but it's really hard work. It's really hard work, you know, and I did find something about myself in that area. Most people are not willing to work as hard as necessary to become successful, and I discovered that I was willing to do that.
Well, and you discovered it yourself, so
Yep.
then you could create a system and you realized cause and effect, right? That you could get something done.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did it take you to get systematized to the point that you were producing?
Well, I went through, I think, which you can relate to, I'm sure many people in real estate can, because I did enter the business when times were really good. The first tough lesson I learned about a hot market is if you're not careful, it'll create horrible work habits. And I got caught with that. You know, every
I
time.
worry about that right now for
Yeah,
certain people.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Every time the phone rang, there was money. I'm like, whoa, man, this is cool. And so my first full-time year, I sold 42 houses. But, and not to take, you know, some of the credit away from me, I mean, I worked really hard, right? But the market was just so hot. You know, I've said for years that one of the primary ingredients for success is being in the right place at the right time. But why are some people more successful than others? Because they put themselves in lots of places lots of times. And that's what I did. And I thought, in all candor, I thought 42 sales my first year, and I had awards from the board of realtors and all this kind of stuff, which I found that was interesting because I'd come from industries where it wasn't personal, you know, satisfaction received by being awarded things, you know. But I found I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, you know.
Being recognized.
Yeah, I did. And I remember my first little plaque, you know. And I try to remember that today in all these years of being in management and teaching, that people really do enjoy recognition. And I was one of those. And so that lasted for 2.5 years, that market. And then the market crashed, and I crashed with it. And I found out that I had created horrible work habits. I had no database. You know, and again, I worked really hard and worked a lot of hours, but I set open houses and I reacted to people. I wasn't proactive, I was reactive.
Right.
Yeah.
And that database and having an active database and being proactive in this business is so important regardless of what the market's doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Staying on top of that so that instead of doing well, you'll excel when the market's hot like that, but you'll still do well when the market isn't hot because you're in control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we see so many people that they're just taking it and it's so busy. We're seeing
Yeah.
so many people move right now because they're deciding on quality of life and they want choices and there's a shortage of inventory and nothing we haven't seen several times over and over again. And you want to just grab them by the shoulders and just say, look, make sure that you have an active database, make sure you communicate with everybody on a regular basis and that you're adding value all the time because this too shall pass,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because it was a humbling experience because I had to sell the things I had accumulated in 2.5 years. I had to sell a rental property I bought. I had to sell my house. I had to sell my Ferrari, some of the good investments I made. and I literally had to start over. You know, I had enough money to survive about another 120 days, and that was it. And so I went back home to LA to see my dad, who had been very successful, and get his advice on what do I do. I went back to Reno PD to try to get my job back. And Chief Parker said, you've been gone 2.5 years, you got to start all over again. So otherwise I would have gone back in law enforcement, in all honesty. But that wasn't an option, so I had to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? And my dad gave me great advice.
What did he say?
He said this, he said a couple of things. Lost my dad about 11 years ago, 85 years old. He had a good run, and he only went to 8th grade. And he ended up owning 23 Chrysler and Toyota dealerships throughout California. Very, very successful. And so I had a lot of respect for my dad. So I went down to see him and laid out, you know, hey Dad, I got like 4 months of money left, and I got to make this thing work. Because put yourself in my shoes. I didn't have the education, didn't have any prior business experience. There weren't many options for me. You know, and the economy was in tough shape. Interest rates 19%, and like there were no other doors I could see open. And so I had to make this work. So that was my motivation. And my dad, probably the 3 or 4 most important things he told me was this. He goes, okay, you've been doing it long enough. He said, I'm going to suggest you do this first. He goes, take a couple days and write down every single thing you do as a real estate agent. And I remember, and he sent me back home. He said, you call me when you got that list done. And I drove 500 miles to get that advice from my dad, right? You know, and so I did. I wrote down, okay, well, we do listing presentations and we make phone calls. And in my era, we used to advertise and we knock on doors and hold open houses and we negotiate and we show buyers homes and we fill out contracts and we do market analysis. I mean, I just literally made a list. It took about a page and a half, you know, on a legal pad. And I called him and said, okay, I got the list. And he goes, okay, good. He says, so here's what you need to do. Every single facet of what you do as a real estate agent, I want you to write down next to each one of those things, what does the average agent do for that activity? What does the average agent do? And he says, call me when you've done that. And so I remember writing things out, like I'll pick a real simple one for demonstration, open houses. The average agent for an open house puts some directional arrows out, puts a sign in front of it, has some flyers to hand people when they walk in, and turn on the lights and, you know, turn on the ball game, hope nobody interrupts them for 3 hours, right? And here's what became clear. When I wrote down what the average agent does and all these different things, and I called my dad and I said, okay, I got that done. He goes, okay, good. He says, now, here's the next step, and this is the key. This is what you asked for. He said, look at each one of those things and ask yourself, am I willing to do more than the average agent does? He goes, let me just tell you right in advance, don't fool yourself to think you're going to do more than the average agent in every one of those things. You won't. You can't. You pick the things that you say, man, I could do more than that. And he says, so you call me back after you complete that task, and you tell me which ones you think you can do more than the average agent. And so I went from someone who didn't have a lot of confidence, you know, I rode a hot market and I knew that, and then I developed these poor habits. I went from that person to a person that when I looked and I saw in writing that open houses, well, they do these 4 or 5 basic things. Well, what if I did 1 or 2 things more than that? If I just did more than the average, then that would cause me to kind of stand out. And that's what led to creating some really good work habits to do more than, example, just to make a point, open houses, I said, well, geez, what if I invite all the neighbors to my sneak preview open house 1 hour before the scheduled opening? Tell them it's open just for you and people you know. Do something like that, and then send a letter to all of them saying, hey, thank you for helping me have a successful open house, whether they came or not. Just some little tiny things that other people didn't do, and that I found quickly generated business, you know? And so that was the first piece of advice he gave me. And then the second thing he said, what is it you're doing now to generate business? And I gave him the laundry list of what we all do. And I'll never forget this, you know, my dad, Pete DeLuca, right? And he's listening to me, and I'm going through this litany of all these things we do, and he goes, you do all those things? And I says, yeah. And he said, well, that's just stupid. And I said,
I can see that.
I said, what do you mean? That's stupid. He said, well, nobody can do all those things really, really well. He says, you can probably do them all poorly, but you're not going to do them really, you're not going to excel in any of it, probably. And I made this statement to him. I said, but Dad, that's what we all do. Here's a direct quote from my late father. He goes, well, then you're all stupid. Yeah. And so he pointed out to me, he said, come on, you're in the military. I never held a gun in my life till I joined the military. Did a couple tours in Vietnam, learned how to fire a gun. He said, and when you joined, you know, and you went into the things that you did in the military, they didn't just give you a gun and say start shooting, you know? They gave you the gun and they told you how to take care of it and how to load it and how to prepare. And then they said, here's the target. You gotta have a target. He said, most of the activities you've just cited to me that you're doing, your target is the entire community of Reno. He said, that's not a realistic target. There's 200,000 people there. You can't possibly have impact on 200,000 people. He said, so you gotta have a target. You don't even have one. And he said, the target, we didn't have terminology back then, database. We never heard of that, right? He said, you just need to make a list of everybody you know. And he says, and once you make that list, go back to how they taught you again now. They didn't just say, hit the target, they had you aim at the bullseye. So that's how I developed that terminology. He said, come up with your bullseye people. Who are your bullseye people? Those are the ones your avid supporters. I mean, those are the ones that will lay down in front of the train on tracks for you. But those are only a handful. You'll never have more than a handful, he said. You know, and then the next one, just picture the rings. You know, and that's what some people teach nowadays. You know, different categories of people in your database. And so it was after, you know, failing because of poor work habits after 2.5 years that I finally developed some good work habits because of the counsel from my father to develop that database. And so I had that database, and it just changed everything. All of a sudden, I had a target.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how long did you do that for before you ended up buying the office, and why did you buy the office?
Yeah, 4.5 years. 4.5 years in the business. After 1 year, you know, I don't mind telling you, you know, had a little ego, you know. I mean, I got the plaques, you know. Look at me, Mr. Hotshot, right? And so after 1 year, Bill, the owner of the company, made me a branch manager. And I had 11 agents, and I went over there. And my reception and management was they all quit. They all went to Bill's office and said, if he's a manager, we quit. Because I was younger than all of them. I had less experience than all of them. And Bill, being a supportive broker he was, said, well, then you quit because he's a manager. So they all came back, tucked their tail between their legs, came back. And that was my reception, the management, right? But I was still selling and managing and doing a pretty poor job because I thought the way you manage was leading by example. So I sold more than everybody. You know, and what I found for many people, I squashed their production, you know, because they couldn't compete with me. When I was a pretty poor manager, and you know, I'm not taking too many shots at myself. I did some really good things too, but that was a huge lesson I had to learn. But that's not how you manage people by just get out there being successful, follow me, you know. and I should have learned that in Special Forces when we were taught that if, here's the analogy I was taught. You're on the beach, here's the raft, and the objective is over there on the other side of the water. And so a leader does not do this. The leader does not say, rah, rah, let's go, let's all jump in a boat and get to the mission, because what you'll discover, you'll be in the boat halfway there, only to realize not only are they not in the boat with you, they're so sure hoping you sink halfway across. And what I learned is that if you want people to get in the boat with you and go on the journey, then you need to have them help you build the boat.
That's profound.
Yeah, it's a real eye-opener. And so after a year of really being a poor branch manager, I finally kind of went back and see, what did you learn when you're 18, 19, 20 years old? And that's when the management began to change. And as a result, my little branch office outproduced the main office. And so Bill said then, I'm going to make you the general sales manager over both the offices. And I did that, and that's when I began to get a taste of what it was like to actually have impact on someone else's success. Well, and that's when I discovered, honestly, for the first time in my career, a true passion. Wow, man, for the single mom to go out there and, you know, get the plaque, you know. I remember the night I became a true manager, the night, and it was at a Reno Board of Realtors Awards dinner, and one of my agents, Gene, got up as salesperson of the year other than me, and it was the first time that I truly felt as proud of her as I had been for myself when I used to get up there and get that. That was the night I became a manager. And so that was a wonderful experience, and I got that taste. And then the market was pretty good in 78, turned in 79 and 80, and I saw Bill doing some things that weren't very wise. with the money, because back in those days, the splits were 50-50, 64. The real estate company made so much money. And I just thought he wasn't very wise in where he was spending the money, buying airplanes and just all kinds of stuff. And I was really frustrated. And so my mentor was from Las Vegas, a guy named Mark Misivic. And Mark, incredible real estate guy. He approached me and said, we want to open in Reno, but we're not going to open unless you be a owner of the Reno operation. So Bill had recruited me. I bought the duplex with Dwayne from Bill.
Wow.
And so Bill, during that transaction, said, God, you'd be great in real estate. You know, now years later, I found out Bill told everybody you'd be great in real estate. I thought he was talking to me, right? And so he's the one that really whet the appetite for me to get a real estate license. And so I went to Bill and I said, because he was like a big brother. We went on vacations together, you know? And I said, Bill, I don't want to leave, but Mark just made me this offer that's like, I can't even turn it down. And he said, well, if you leave, everybody's going to leave with you, because I'd been the general manager and I hired most of the people. And I said, geez, I don't really know that, you know, and I felt guilty, quite honestly. And so he said to me, rather than leave, why don't you buy me out? So it was his idea, it wasn't my idea. And I said, well, geez, what would that take? And so we made the deal that day, you know. And so I sold everything I had, not like a lot. I sold 3 houses, sold my own home to get the money to buy Bill out. And so I was all in.
Yeah, serious skin in the game.
Yeah, so that's how I became the owner, you know. And I think it was a surprise to some people, but in other people it wasn't a surprise. I think the leaders in an office surface, people see that. They see who they are, you know. So most people were
We had enough time and you had enough of a
Yeah.
a proven track record.
Yeah.
You still love getting the most and the best out of everybody, and it definitely shows. So you go from owning this office that was incredibly successful, increasing the per person productivity to the tune of
48.6 closings per agent per year.
phenomenal, like unheard of in this industry.
Yeah, we did a lot of new construction. We had a huge referral organization, which added to those numbers, you know. But it was all by design. It wasn't just right place, right time. We put a lot of effort into it. I had a great management team, you know.
Well, I appreciate your humility, but you accomplished some things that most people don't accomplish, and you got this passion behind you. And so, did you start teaching then and start traveling on the road? Did you sell the brokerage first? How did that all come about, that you put this system in place to be able to do that and impact so many more people?
Well, the phases were, when a branch manager I sold, big producer, general manager sold a little bit, started scaling back. And then when I bought the company, I decided to get out of personal production and take all that energy and put it into what could I do with the already successful company? What could I do with that? So we built it from 34 to 192 agents, you know, and I just poured all my energy into trying to get them producing more. As a result of some notoriety of that success, people begin to reach out to me and say, hey, can you come share, you know, how you did what you did. And so I think I spoke at my first NAR convention in 1982, you know, 1 year after I bought the company. And it wasn't a management program. They asked me to come talk, you know, be on a panel, you know, because I'd sold 200 homes. And so I got a taste from speaking at NAR, and then people reach out to you and say, geez, can you help me? You know, I got a taste of, geez, I could help this person in this state and over this place. And then my mentor, Mark, from Las Vegas, he was a CRS instructor. And so he came to me and said, and he kept his word. He never did open in Reno. He wouldn't come there unless I ran it. So I have great respect for Mark. And he said, you'd be a great instructor. And so he's the one that had me audition for CRS courses. So I became an instructor in 1982. And so that was my foray into teaching part of it. But I was still running a real estate company, and I might have done, I don't really know, 10, 12, 14 seminars a year, maybe something like that, you know, maybe a little more than one a month. But I began to see that I personally received some satisfaction hearing back from someone, hey, I used that idea, you know, and I got a list Philistine, or, you know, the real novice people to the people that, hey, I did this and now I have more balance, and that was pretty cool. So that kind of fed that. I really enjoyed that. So, but I ran that company for another 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What you did though, having that impact, to me, when I see that, that's the difference between happiness and fulfillment,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to be happy,
Yeah.
but it's unbelievable to be fulfilled. And you kind of almost feel like I was put here for this,
Mm-hmm.
to have this impact.
Yeah.
So then you created an entire system. When was
Yeah.
that? Was that during that 9 years? Was that after?
Yeah, it was during, and it was early on, because one of the things you learn in the training I'd done in the military was to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses. And because what makes a team is taking, in my case in that era, men, all right, and taking men with strengths and putting them together that compensated for the other men's weaknesses. So my weakness is this, then that's his strength, that makes a good team. So I learned that many years before, and then all of a sudden I was running a company, and as you said, all in, you know, I went back and said, okay, let's don't reinvent the wheel here. What have you learned in the past in law enforcement, military, that you might be able to use here? And that was one of them. And so I recognized what my weaknesses were. And my weakness to this day, I'm not organized by nature. I'm just not. And so what I learned about myself is I had to have checklists. I had to have systems in place. Otherwise I'd be distracted. I'd be all over the place, and I'd be well intended, but I got pulled away, and then I couldn't come back. And where was I when I left off? And so that's really what led to the creation of many checklists and systems to keep me on track. You know, and everything has to be in writing for me. Everything. You know.
Well, and then you check it off the list and you know you're on track, and
Yeah.
you can keep going. So you created the system, and then you ended up doing training not just in the United States. You started literally traveling around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I had from exposure doing like any art convention and stuff, you know, people from all over the world, as you know, and I had people come on and say, I want to hire you, and I said, where are you from? That's a weird accent you got, you know. and I turned down most international engagements. I really didn't want to go that way. I had remarried, had a young family, you know, two young boys. My daughter was with me, you know, and I didn't want to be gone for more than, I swear I'll never be gone for more than 4 days, ever. And so like South Africa, you know, they wanted me to come for 3 weeks, and they were going to pay a lot of money. And I was tempted. I'm a business guy. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I talked to Robin, my wife, and said, I'd have to be gone for 3 weeks. And we joined and said, that wouldn't be good for our family.
Right.
And so I turned it down. Yeah.
You have to have those boundaries and know what they are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of real estate
really
people
decide
don't.
that.
They don't have the boundaries. They'll work 7 days a week. They'll miss, you know, the play with their daughter in school because they got a listing opportunity. It's really sad. Every one of us have to go through that, though.
Right.
We have to.
Right.
Till you finally learn that almost everybody, if you say, geez, I can't do it, then can we do it this time? They say yes. You know, but we have to learn that.
Yeah, but I think knowing what your priorities are, I know for me, I would tell people, I'll make you a fortune, but my family comes first, so you can live with that, we're gonna be fine. And some people couldn't live with it.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to move on to something else. But I'm not sorry for any of it. I think that it was the right path to go down, but I think a lot of times with people, they don't decide what they want, and they don't decide where they are willing to go and what their priorities are first. It's almost that like they allow this business to control them instead of them being in control of their business.
Easily happens. Easily.
Right. So,
but in some ways, I give law enforcement credit for some of the things I learned in that area. Example, having been a cop for 7 years, I swore whatever I went into, next profession, it would not be a profession that I had no control over my clientele. No, I wasn't going to go there again. All right. And so I early on decided, when I say early on, it probably took 3 or 4 years, in all candor, but I decided that if I told these people I can't do it on Sunday, I can do it Saturday or Monday, and if they said no, it has to be Sunday, those were people that I knew I shouldn't even be working with, because we had a conflict right off the bat. But it is what it is. It's sad, but it's just the real world. You have to go through that for a while till you finally learn that you can say, I can't do it. there's not many people right off the bat, beginning of their career, say, oh,
Right.
I can't do that. You know, that comes with a little
You have
bit
to-
of,
right.
yeah, you gotta pay your dues, you know. But fortunately, I did learn it pretty quick, and so, yeah, made the business much more enjoyable.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you do this training, you're ranked like literally high nationally and high in the world for public speaking, for doing all these trainings, and you've had this impact on all of these people, and yet you still aren't done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have your mind's eye that you really want to build something, and you really want to do something that I'm using your words, not mine.
Yeah.
That you want to leave a legacy,
Yeah.
and I won't forget. I literally won't forget, because it's that moment for me. I always can tell when I'm going to work with somebody and when it's going to work, and I always have to go with my gut and my heart. But I remember, we met in a couple of airports talking before you came on board, and I was so grateful that you brought your wife Robin, and we met in Texas, and we had great conversations, great dinner, and you wanted to make sure that she was really comfortable, which
Yeah.
obviously family priority. I love that, and that's been long term, and showed all the way back to you saying, I'm not going to leave my kids for this amount of time. But as you were going this way to your gate and I was going this way to my gate, you said, Tam, I want this to be my legacy.
Yeah.
I cried all the way to my gate.
Yeah. Well, you like to think that as you go through life, you learn some things. Otherwise, it'd be kind of a strange course that you took. And I have learned some things, but a couple of things, popped in my head as you were sharing that. I became an instructor, a teacher, a trainer, not just by natural ability. I mean, when I decided that I wanted to go ahead and take advantage of the opportunities presented to me to go out and start sharing some ideas, I researched in Reno the different Toastmasters clubs and found out which was the most competitive. That the International Toastmaster of the year before, had come from one of the chapters in Reno. And I went there. I went to 3 or 4 and listened. And I went there and they told me, don't bother coming here if you want to be told how good you are, because our objective is to tear you apart when you give a presentation. So you get better. If you want to get better, you come here. I joined that even back then at the local level to try to learn how to speak. And then when the opportunity came to maybe go to some other regions in the country, I signed up and paid for a 2-day instructor development workshop put on by NAR. And I went to those twice, Harold, and I can remember the guy's name many years ago, and was a student listening to, the irony is that years later, Hal and I taught that course for NAR, and so I guess, and during that journey, when I went into business and I recognized I was deficient in many areas in the business world, that's when I became a reader. That's when I'm, from the student who barely made it through high school, never got in trouble. I don't want to imply that. I don't mean to go back too far here, Tammy, but I wasn't a good student academically, but I was a good kid. I never cut a day at school, ever. Because why would I? That's where all my friends were, And so that's why I went to school, to be around my friends. And so it was much later in life that I learned to become a student of things, to read and to absorb different things. And so I guess I want to make sure people hear that message. You don't go from here just to be this international speaker just by natural ability. I don't think many people can do that. I certainly couldn't. So I had to become a student in order to progress through the different levels of that ability. And each one brought different rewards, And in some ways, my family, it's wonderful being a speaker because your family's treated wonderfully, They take care of you, and there's a lot of perks that went with that. And I enjoyed that lifestyle for a long time. But I missed being in the trenches. You can stand in front of, like I did for you in the Bahamas, of 2,000 people and have a standing ovation and make lots of money, people buying the things that that you provide. But it was missing I wonder who's using the ideas. And I wonder how many people's lives have been impacted. And I don't mean life-changing, but just impacted, where they're a little more successful. And I miss that. I enjoyed being on a stage and getting the accolades that came with it, but the component that was missing was what I had when I owned a company, and that was be able to see people's journeys and how they progress, in part because of what I might have been able to deliver to them. And so, I've been around a long time at this stage, 44 years in this business, and I know this is the final lap. I know this is the kind of the last hurrah here. And so I always swore that I would never be the old ball player who stayed past his peak. And even though I had some acclaim in being a trainer and speaker, there comes a point where people say, oh, I've heard him, I'm a guy, he was a different era, didn't even have email, and that's just the real world. And so I said, okay, what am I gonna do? What am I going to do? Because I'm not ready. I found out a couple of times I'm not really cut out for retirement. I'm not really good at that. And so I said, yeah, I want to do something in this final phase of my career that has direct impact on owners of offices and agents, and I'm close enough to actually witness the success that they're having. And take on maybe a grander scale than I did my own company with 200 people, to have thousands of people, that I know their names, and I know them well enough I can, like last night, send them video text messages congratulating them on the awards they got, and because it's hope it comes across the right way. I've learned in my travels that you get to certain positions in life, you have impact on people when you reach out to them. I have more impact today than I did when I was a younger guy, when I was a branch manager. I have more impact today when, geez, Rick DeLuca sent me a video or a handwritten note, I understand that, and that's not ego, that's just the real world. And it's foolish on my part not to recognize that and use that. They should feel good by hearing from me personally, their success. So my legacy will be thousands of people in the 5 western states will say, yeah, geez, Rick DeLuca has helped me have a more productive and successful office, helped me have a more successful career as a salesperson. I want to have that direct input on people.
Well, I know that you do, and it's a great thing to witness, and having that passion. What made you say exit will work for that?
Yeah, well, I had other opportunities, and because I'm pretty basic, I made a very short list of what I call have-tos. You have to have these things, and in no particular order. They had to have the technology, because you can't survive if you don't. That's like a no-brainer. But a lot of people say they have technology. Not so much. Because when you do seminars or you do training and people hire you and pay good money to come out and do a program, what happens more often than not is after you do the program, then you go have dinner or lunch or play golf for 4 hours with them, and you hear the complaints.
What's really...
And the things they like and the things that, and you hear that. And I've made note of those things for years. And so I understand that there's a number of organizations that say, we've got state-of-the-art technology. Well, maybe it says that, but it's not quite state-of-the-art. So that was a big one. And even at my age, I'm somewhat technological. You have to be.
Right.
If you're going to stand in front of people, you better understand how to do these things. So that was one. Systems was another. They got to have systems. It's got to be in writing. You got to be able to go to the resource center in our case and put in there, I just hired a receptionist, and there it is. There's the job description right there. They've got to have that. Most organizations don't have that. Okay, you know what most organizations have? They have good intentions, but there's a huge void between intentions and actually having something tangible. And so it had to have systems in place. It had to have some whoever I went with had to have support. Because I've been involved in this industry long enough to know that you can have tools, you can have the energy and be surrounded by successful people, but when something's delivered to you, those people are not necessarily available to you to reach out to answer all the questions. So there's got to be support at all different levels of the organization. And I've seen up close and personal, well-intended, good organizations that fall way short when it comes to support. And the last thing I want to do was to use my reputation, my name, and whatever skills I have to bring people into my family and then not have the support behind me when I wasn't available. That was really important to me. And then, maybe culture is really, really difficult to discern a culture. But it was one of my have-tos. And that's where I've learned in my travels to really have an accurate feel for a culture. You have to spend time with the people, And so the time I spent in the Bahamas with people and talking to them before the seminar, after seminars, when I met you, and how gracious you were, and the foundation I have, and that signaled something to me right away about a potential culture of the organization. And then, as you cited, I've been married 35 years last week, and I've learned not to make major decisions unless my wife Robin is involved in it. And I've learned that painfully. Okay. And but I have learned it, and so that's why we flew to Dallas to meet you. I wanted her involved in this decision because she's so discerning. I think she can see more accurately than I can sometimes to get a sense of a culture, of where you come from. And so that was a real big one, trying to discern the culture, and I felt really comfortable with that. And then the final component, because I haven't been around so long, I've seen every business model there is. And there's some good ones. I'm not sitting there bashing other business models, but if I was going to make a change and go in a different direction, I wanted to be with someone who truly had a unique business model, unique to the industry. And so when I saw the sponsoring ability that Exit has to offer, it's unlike anything anybody else has. It's not profit sharing where they can manipulate numbers to show a profit or not show a profit. It's not some values in a stock that might be worth something on paper, but what's somebody willing to write a check for, It was tangible, it's simple, very simple to understand. It was unique. And so that was my final component. It has to be something that's a unique business model. And that's what Exit has. So when I just picture those different things with a box, and I literally went through and checked each box. And that's what helped me make that decision that, yes, this is what I've been looking for. This is who I'm going to join to create that legacy, my final journey in this business.
I'm so glad that you thought it out so well, because the last thing in the world you want is to make a bad decision, right? Mm-hmm. You want to know that you're really happy. To add to that mix, you join, and 2 weeks later we're sheltered in place. Yeah. And I have to say, you rose to the occasion rapidly with leading your people and giving them as much education and as much information and connecting them as quickly as humanly possible so that they felt more in control. They felt more in control of their life, and they felt more in control of where they were going. And you used that time to really ramp up and learn as much as you possibly could so that you could hit the ground running. I can't wait to see what the next handful of years are going to bring, and I'm really grateful that you decided to do this.
Thank you.